Chris Landry, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Thanks. Always great to be with you.
We're going to spend a lot of time, obviously, picking your brain as we approach the NFL draft, but just some thoughts on spring football. 6 practices in. We've got a few left leading into the first scrimmage, and Nick Saban sounds a little frustrated with his defense here in Tuscaloosa. He's saying that we need to be more consistent, need to do things right, but we've talked about all the new coaches, and you got a lot of new players. Only 3 defensive players on that side of the football on defense returning, and all those new coaches. Sounds like Nick Saban stressed out going into practice number 7.
Well, I think, he's the master at sending messages to his team through the media. He can say things, but when he tends to kind of say it publicly, then those kids hear about it, and they see it, and they hear it firsthand, secondhand, and so a lot of it is, and again, I'm not there. Can't wait to start looking at the tape once I get the draft in the rearview mirror. But I think it's no different than any other. As you mentioned, maybe a tad different with all the coaching changes, but it's still the same thing, still the same messages he wants to put across, and no excuses. You got a responsibility, you got a job, and we expect to get it done. So, things are not. I hate to say this. Things are not supposed to be smooth. They're not supposed to be good. If everything was great, you wouldn't need coaches. You wouldn't need development. You wouldn't need to get better. The purpose is to be able to use every opportunity to find a way to figure out what you're not doing well, work upon that, improve upon that, and while continuing to grow. So I would think it's probably the same as it's always been, just with, as you mentioned, a lot more different people involved in the process now.
Well, Chris, we've looked at it a lot of different times when we featured you because you've been around Nick Saban for many years. You understand how demanding he could be. But let's talk about it from the other assistant coaches, because Lane Kiffin told us on this show just a couple of days ago, he said really the first year, it was a gigantic learning curve. He said, really, I didn't know what Nick Saban expected until year number 2. He said, that early part, it's like, what does he want? What does he expect? For those assistant coaches, they were just like Lane Kiffin in year number 1 going, well, what does he want? How does he want me to do it? How does he want me to approach it? How does he want me to coach? It can be very stressful from their perspective as well.
Oh, listen, absolutely. It's definitely, look, anytime – let me put it this way that people can relate to. Anybody that's gone into a different work environment, whether it's a different field or the same field, you're different people, kind of how they do things is different. And I don't care where you go. And so with Nick, there's a certain way you do it. You've got to adjust to him. And there's that period of it. And listen, he's kind of that way. I mean, it is tough to work with different guys. And look, I work with, I coach for Bill Arnsparger, and he was, a different personality than, other coaches have been, or Jeff Fisher or Mike Archer, or Bill Belichick, and so they're different types of people in terms of how you adjust to their personality, what they expect, what's expected of you. All those things are really, really important. So I think it's always tough because he's tough on you. I think, it's one of those things where you have to, some coaches don't like to be corrected on the field. Some coaches don't like, there's a lot of pressure. I've been around Parcells. Parcells was famous for pulling a coach aside and saying, I'm going to ride you all day because I don't think your guys are responding, so I'm going to ride you, and the players are going to respond. There's psychology involved in it. So, it takes a while to get used to that, to know what he wants and how he wants it in meetings, in practice. And this is kind of part of what it's like. You get a lot of time in spring, and spring is different than the fall in terms of what you're teaching, how you're teaching. You're not preparing for a game right now. You're preparing your team to do certain things in installs and certain things technique-wise that you want done. And how you get that done, sometimes it takes some time to adjust it. So it is going to be a little bit different in that regard.
But Chris, if you can coach like Craig Kuligowski, This guy's an expert technician. You and I have talked about him before. I mean, if you can coach, you can coach. You just got to learn exactly the expectations and maybe how to deliver it, right?
Well, and learn how it's going to work within the scheme. He's a great teacher of pass rush, but, are they going to want to fly those guys off the edge like he's done in other places at Miami and Missouri, or are they going to be more play contained like they've done at Alabama? Well, that's going to be personnel dictated, but it's also going to be dictated by Nick Saban. So, again, it doesn't mean that, the guys are going to have as many sacks individually or the individual group is going to have as many gaudy statistics, because it's going to have to be taught within the team concept. So what you can coach, yes. Coaching is teaching. But what you're teaching and how you want it done within the overall team concept is something that you have to adjust to from, team to team position, the program to program, team to team that you're coaching for. And in this case, that's what he's going to have to understand, is making that adjustment. And there's some things that he is very open to. Nick is, like other good coaches, are open to different ideas. We could try teaching it this way, coach. This is, and some of those things are looked at and absorbed and tried out and either kept or thrown out. That's part of the process. It's not unlike any other business of technique of trying to go about teaching and getting better. That's what football is.
Chris, but is it fair to say, with only 3 starters returning, all these new coaches, that Alabama's defense may not be the typical Nick Saban defense? I mean, I know we're 150 days away from Alabama-Louisville.
Right.
But is it fair to say that this defense would be possible that it might take a little step back?
Well, it's going to be different for the reasons that you mentioned. It's different people. I think people just kind of put a blanket over and say, well, Alabama's defense is always great. If you go back and look at the past 8 years, every one of those defenses were different. No, they're all good, but if you look at them, they had their own different styles and personalities, not different schemes, but certain aspects of their defense were different from year to year. This one's going to be the same, and maybe more so due to the fact that they've got a lot of personnel changes, player and coaching. So, absolutely. Does it mean that I would expect that the program to take a step back and for them to, all of a sudden be a step below what they have been? I wouldn't go that far, because everything's relative. I don't, like in most cases, I don't think that they're going to be an elite type of team in the early part of the year, and they'll grow into it. And people, as they always do, will look at the results of who they're playing against and determine how good they are. Well, how good you are is really up to a standard of what you want them to be, and you don't want that standard to be against who you're playing, because who you're playing may not be all that good, or they may be really good, and it may give a false narrative of what you truly are and how you're developing. I would think this team's going to get better and better as the year progresses, and in the early part of the year, they probably won't be as good as they are in the latter part of the year, and we'll see if that's the case.
Chris, let me ask you, when you look at LSU in the upcoming season, what do you see? What do you see as far as Coach O in Baton Rouge?
A lot of question marks. Offensive line has to be better. Searching for a running back. That they don't have the guys, Fournette, bell cow running backs. They've got to develop one. They want to do a little bit more with spreading people out and try to maybe run out of the spread. Steve Ensminger is probably a little bit underrated as a coach. See, this is a perfect example of they hired Ed Orgeron. They missed out on Tom Herman and missed out on Jimbo Fisher. And they basically, administratively said, well, we'll hire you, we'll put you in that job, but you're going to have to go hire a big-name coordinator. Well, they went out and hired a Matt Canada, and they empowered him to basically, you're in charge of the offense. Well, it's great to hire a good coordinator, but this whole thing and this narrative by the fans, well, you just let the coordinator do it and you stay the heck out of the way. It doesn't work. So all of a sudden, what message are you giving? And so Matt Canada feels like, hey, stay out of my meeting room. I'm going to do this. The head coach is the head coach. And if the head coach is not qualified, then you've made a mistake by hiring that guy. Well, that was oil in water. Matt and Ed That did mix, and it never mixed right because of the administrative way they went about it. So, if truth be told, the guy that Ed would have liked to have hired as a coordinator last year would have been Steve Ensminger. Well, it worked out. They're able to do it this year. I don't know that it's going to be appreciably better, the offense, but I think it's going to be a little different, and again, it's going to come down to that offensive line having to be much better. I think they're in a little bit of trouble. I think that, again, I don't like to base a season on schedules because that's all relative, but they look like a team that's no better than a 7 or 8 win team. But again, that depends upon how some of the teams on the schedule end up being as well. I think they're not a real threat in the West, and would only be a threat in terms of record if everybody struggles. You know, Auburn collapsed on them in the second half of last year's game. You know, they beat some mediocre teams last year. This was a bad year in the league, in the SEC, if you look at it, among the top-tier teams. Outside of Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn for stretches, I mean, nobody was consistently very good. It's going to be a tough year, I think. I don't see a gaudy win record unless people around them in the league collapse.
Can Coach O survive? I mean, you said 7 or 8 wins. Let's just say that that's true. Do you think he can survive that?
Well, keep in mind that what needs to happen at LSU is there needs to be a house cleaning with the president and the athletic director. Those guys are going to fight to keep him because when they fire Ed Orgeron, which is coming, it's only a matter of time, those guys are going out with him because these are the ones that have basically kind of made the bed in which they all have to live in. So I think a house cleaning is coming. It will depend. Look, they'll put a spin on it if they win 8 games. Hey, we're making progress. But you know, even if you look at recruiting's pretty good. Pretty good's not getting it. So I guess my point is, I think they lived off of what was a lot of mediocrity in the league, behind Alabama, to some degree Auburn. We're going to have to see how it plays out. It's going to take a couple of years for Jimbo to get things squared away at A&M. If Auburn is a little bit more consistent, which under Gus they've never been consistent. They've been anything but I still think Auburn's a better program right now than LSU. If A&M gets to the point where they're better, then all of a sudden you have some issues with the program, which clearly to me has been regressing at LSU. Now it becomes more obvious to other people that maybe don't look at the same way. So when you say is he going to survive, I think if he wins 8 games, he probably gets 2019. I would be surprised if he's go after next year, but I think long range it would be tough for him to have consistent success. I just don't think his ability as a recruiter, as a position coach, is kind of getting undermined by the fact that this is not a well-coached team. They have regressed in a lot of ways, and as a recruiter, they're getting beat. I mean, it's like Patrick Surtain Jr. I mean, you got a kid got a chance to go in a stable environment at Alabama or go play at LSU. Well, Ed Orgeron is going to outwork anybody as a recruiter, getting on the phone and talking to kids. But when you look at that program, it's just not as impressive of a program in terms of the head coach. People like Ed, and people in football don't have as much respect as they do like him. If I could say it maybe that way is the best way to describe it.
Chris, you said LSU may not be a threat in the SEC West. Is there anybody that?
No, I don't know. I'll stop you there. I don't know. I don't know that there's. Look, I mean, Auburn has got changes, and good luck figuring out Auburn. I mean, it's they're great, they're average, they're awful, then they're great again. I don't know. I mean, A&M again has got a lot of changes. Arkansas may not ever quite get to that level. Mississippi State, for what they are, going to have a really good team next year. But what does that mean? Does that mean 8 wins, 9, 7? Ole Miss is the West doesn't look pretty. So if you told me that LSU finishes second in the West, that wouldn't shock me. Well, somebody's got to finish second. I mean, to me, it's Alabama and a whole bunch of people that are just pretty average, with the one possible exception of Auburn that I think is a little bit better than the others, but maybe not necessarily next year. But there's a big drop-off. Just like I think there's a drop-off in the East, which we haven't been able to say that in a while. I think Georgia's kind of at a point where, it may take a couple of years for Florida or Tennessee, in that order, to maybe get to challenge Georgia. But I think there's probably a little bit more balance maybe in the East, because I think South Carolina can have a good team, not challenge Georgia, of course, winning the East. But, I think right now, at least I look at the future at Florida and think that has a chance to get better. Not so much this year, but in the future, I think they can challenge. Right now, if I'm looking at the West and I say, who's the program that in 3 years could be the biggest challenger to Alabama in its current state with Nick Saban, of course, I would say right now the program that jumps out to me the most would be Jimbo Fisher and A&M. That would be the program that has potentially more things going for it. Now, they're not there, and they're not even close because they got a lot of things to clean up. But I think in 3 years, that could be the program. And by then, heck, we don't know in this league. Auburn gave Gus that big contract, but you think they'd run away from buying him out in 2 years? I mean, we all know how this works in this league. But, no, I think that right now we're seeing separation where it's Alabama and Georgia in their respective divisions, and I think they would have to be a major coming back to the pack before anybody could catch them.
Well, Chris, and looking at 2018 schedule for Alabama, they've got Louisville at 150 days, Arkansas State, Ole Miss in Oxford, Texas A&M here in Tuscaloosa, Louisiana Lafayette here in Tuscaloosa, Arkansas on the road, Missouri here for homecoming, Tennessee on the road, LSU in Baton Rouge, Mississippi State here, the Citadel here, Auburn, the Citadel. And I know we're looking early, but I don't see a lot of potential hurdles on that schedule.
No, and you might want to delete this comment because Nick won't like this, but, they could play average football in a lot of those games and still win. Now, you know what I mean? I mean, they can...
Rat poison.
Yeah, rat poison. That's right, damn Landry. You know what I mean? They could try a lot of things and do a lot of things. I mean, now, again, whether they can be a championship team again next year will depend upon how they progress through that schedule. But listen, anything can happen. It's football, and it's a long season. And for goodness sakes, who knows what a team's going to look like in November as we're trying to figure this out here in April. There's just no way. But I'm looking at it, and, yeah, will LSU in Baton Rouge play Alabama tough? Yeah. Could they beat Alabama? Yeah, if Alabama has a sloppy game and turns it over a bunch, of course. We know what Auburn and what Auburn could do and has done against Alabama at times. Who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought that Alabama would have lost to Auburn last year for most of the season. You go into the injuries and all that, got Alabama at a bad time. There you go. So we don't know, but I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I don't think A&M's ready yet. Louisville, not as good as the teams that they've played at the beginning of the year in the past couple of years, but maybe Alabama won't be as well. So maybe they won't blow them out, but, I don't see really anybody that you mentioned that I say, oh, yeah, boy, that's going to be tough. I mean, I wouldn't put any of those teams in the category that I would have put Florida State at the beginning of last year. As in terms of a really good team, and, of course, we saw what happened to Florida State. I didn't expect Florida State to be as down as they were. I didn't expect the injury to the quarterback and the ensuing injuries. That went to a spiral. So, all of a sudden, if bad things happen to Alabama and they come back to the pack, well, then we have to revisit A&M and Mississippi State and LSU and Auburn. Maybe those games against Alabama are closer, but as I look at it right now, I see a significant gap.
Scouting notes in the first round grading quarterbacks. Chris, let's go a little deeper into this because quarterbacks is going to be a hot topic as we lead into the draft 3 weeks from tomorrow.
Well, it always is, and you're right. It's going to, obviously likely start at the top, and there's a scenario where you could see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure that's the way it's going to play out, but it could. Certainly, you would expect the Jets to take 1 at 3. We'll see what the Giants do. I think it depends upon what quarterback the Browns take at 1. But It is going to be intriguing, where those are going to fall, and then kind of where that next wave is going to start, because Josh Allen has a lot of physical skills, and the quarterback position is so overvalued because in this league, in the NFL, if you have a good quarterback, it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to win. But if you don't have one, it guarantees you that you're not going to be successful. You're not going to win. So you got to have one, and so this is why they're overvalued in free agency and the draft. And we're going to see these guys go pretty high. And I would say that you're going to see Baker Mayfield at some point, Lamar Jackson go in the first round, and don't be surprised, even though I got a mid-second round grade on Rudolph. I think that there's a really good chance that he ends up going in the first round. Why would Mason Rudolph go in the first round? Because they're all overvalued. Ryan Tannehill wasn't truly a first-round guy. Neither was Joe Flacco, Patrick Mahomes. They all go in the first round because if you don't have one, you are compelled to find one, and that raises the value. The draft, like free agency, is about supply and demand.
You see Buffalo taking a quarterback?
I do. In fact, I think that they are very anxious to try to move up and get one and combine him with A.J. The thing is, if you have two good ones and A.J. turns out pretty well and you got a good young one, so much the better. It's like having real estate. You can't have too much. You can sell them. You don't have to live in all those houses. But if you don't have one, man, you better hedge your bet. I mean, you better sign one. You better draft one. Look at the Bears. They signed and gave Mike Glennon a lot of money last year. Moved up to 2 and took Mitchell Trubisky. Turn out Trubisky is the guy. Nobody's sitting there saying, boy, you screwed up that Mike Glennon move. What if they didn't draft Trubisky? What if they didn't draft a quarterback? And they got Glennon. Boy, they're still in a bad way. You move on from Glennon. So I think you want to hedge your bet. And I know Alabama fans are excited to see what A.J. McCarron could possibly do in Buffalo, as am I. But you know what? You can figure that out later. Having too many good quarterbacks is never a problem. Not having one good enough is the problem that'll get you fired.
Let me ask you the surrounding cast around A.J. McCarron there in Buffalo. Is there enough to win and be a playoff team that can contend there? I mean, do you see enough in Buffalo that surrounding A.J. McCarron at that quarterback position that can get the job done offensively?
Well, they went to the playoffs last year. Now, you can debate whether they were a playoff team. Getting in 6 spots and getting 6 good teams in each conference is, it just sometimes it's not real pretty. They were one of them, and they got in, and you remember kind of famously the Bengals scored late and kind of allowed the Bills to get in. It was not all that impressive of a playoff game, didn't move well on offense. So I think that, listen, everybody's looking up against New England. New England's got a stranglehold in that division, because they're good. They got Brady, they got Belichick, but no one else has made a real move. If I were going to look at the teams behind them, the Jets are a long ways away. Buffalo and Miami, in that order, are not as far away. But, could they possibly get a wild card spot? Absolutely. Gotta get some work, gotta add some more pieces. Kelvin Benjamin began to help them a little bit. Incognito played pretty well. They've got some answers on defense that are pretty good. Like Hughes, like their secondary. Think they got one of the better secondaries in the league. But offensively, listen, they need to have a good draft and put some pieces around A.J., no doubt.
We are talking right now to Chris Landry. Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. Chris, let me ask you just about some local teams here. New Orleans, what is the priority going in? Because we have split right here in Tuscaloosa. Part of the Saints fans and part of it's Falcon territory. Let's focus on New Orleans here for just a couple of minutes. What do you see New Orleans need to do in this upcoming draft?
They need a pass rusher, and they need a playmaker at tight end, wide receiver at 27. Right now, I've got 18 first-round grades. That would suggest that likely they're getting second-round value with their pick. They would consider moving up for the right guy. Obviously, like most would consider moving back if they can get, an extra pick and get the same grade plateau of a player at a later spot. But I think that there'll be a tight end potentially of value there. Don't think that there'll be necessarily a receiver that is going to be there that's going to be, worth taking, although we'll see. Don't know how that's going to play out, but pass rusher is certainly a need as well. So those jump out at me as the biggest needs for them. Need to add a good young offensive lineman that can help us. Obviously, they've lost Zach Streak to retirement. So good team, but they really lack a playmaker at tight end. Ben Watson helps, but not enough. A good young player in the red zone that can help.
What do you see in Atlanta? What do you see they need?
Atlanta's another good roster. An effort of trying to improve that defensive line, both in and tackle positions. I think adding another young receiver themselves, young corner, a guard is a big need for them. I don't think it'll be a high priority, but there's some good players deep into this draft they'd like to add. This is a pretty good roster as well. I think both New Orleans and Carolina, and for that matter, Carolina's pretty good, but they need to build more pieces to that defense and add another playmaking receiver. In guard, they got to fix somehow, some way through the second wave of free agency post-draft or getting a young guy through the draft.
We're talking to LandryFootball.com, Chris Landry from LandryFootball.com. Chris, take a couple of minutes here and talk more about the website and how people can get in touch.
Well, listen, we started this 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, of what can we do for fans to give them insights into the game from a coaching and scouting perspective. Whether you're a college fan, you're an NFL fan, you follow recruiting, you follow the draft, you follow, during the season, the games and how teams are grading out. We take you inside the film room. That's what we do. We explain what happened. You already know what happened. We're going to explain why it happened and break it down for you. So give you a viewpoint from a coaching and scouting perspective. That's what we do. It's like having your own personnel department, scouting and coaching department at your disposal for less than a magazine subscription. So that's what it's all about. Listen, if it involves players, teams, coaches, schemes, that's what we do for you at LandryFootball.com. There's no off season. As you can tell, we're deeply involved in the draft and free agency. And I'm just looking to get that out of the way to really break down into the summer, break down all spring practices, break down, Alabama's roster and exactly where the strengths are of different players and weaknesses and areas of improvement in all the teams around the country. So it's a fun time of year, and thank God we have an off season to get ready for the season. And so if you want to be best prepared for the season, better than you've ever been, check it out. By the way, we've got our best discount ever that I'm going to have to stop soon because it's killing me, but it's a great opportunity. If you sign up now, right prior to the draft, you'll get the rest of the draft, free agency, all the draft board, scouting reports, and you get the football season for free. It's half price. So it's $39.99 for a year to give you an idea. So it's a great opportunity. You go to LandryFootball.com, you check it out. You see the discount. Take advantage of it. You have any problems, send us an email. And, of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at Landry Football.
LandryFootball.com. Football views from a coach, a scout, and administrator. LandryFootball.com provides that insight directly from an NFL scout, and you could go simply on the website and join. Chris, as always, thank you again for your time, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
You do the same. Thanks a bunch, Ryan.